Clix and Duke qualified for FNCS finals. They did so in a super interesting way, not using an SMG and being able to get enough surge and refreshes in order to come in second place. So let's VOD review it. Let's talk about Clix and Duke's off spawn. Now, they're going to land at the Joneses as their drop spot. It's not the best POI in the world, but it's also not the worst. It gives them more than enough loot to play with and give them a good start in the game. They're going to consistently have a bunch of heals, tons of ammo, and when they're uncontested, they're going to be fine. The key for these two is maximizing their efficiency during their loot path and farming. They need to make sure they're not doubling back for certain chests or floor spawns, while additionally making sure every single thing that they're hitting is maximizing the farm per hit. One of the major advantages of the Joneses is a taxi spawn that is going to spawn some of the time. Now, you can't rely on it for movement, but when it's there, you have to use it, and that is exactly what these two are going to do. They're going to use the taxi for their mid-game rotate, and they're going to be able to use this to get deep into zone, find themselves a great position that's a power position with a ton of vision, which they wouldn't have been able to rotate to as quickly without this. That's great recognition by them to understand what's at their POI and make sure they're using this to their advantage. Most teams are just leaving their POI when first zone starts moving. Clix and Duke are going to do similar. They're slightly ahead of that, but nonetheless, they're going to have the car, which gives them an earlier rotate and allows them to get ahead of most teams, and they have the pick of the litter for wherever they want to base up. Now, you may ask, why does it matter that they're early on their rotate? Well, it is going to allow them to get a ton of surge damage, which a lot of teams struggle with, because they're able to get one of those elevated positions that has a lot of vision on the zone. They're able to see teams while rotating. Now, we see these two are just going to continue to rack up their surge damage, hitting their AR tags, and if you notice, they're both holding an AR shotgun, no SMGs in their loadout. They are making sure they're prioritizing storm surge and getting themselves above, so that way they don't have to cause an okay fight later on whether or not they have surge. One thing I wanted to point out that I noticed Clix and Duke did earlier, and it's sitting in a bush for at least 5 to 10 seconds. At first, when you're in the bush, it's going to give you audio cues, and then if you sit still, don't move at all, the audio cues leave. So take a listen. This is before and then after. Now, when it comes to fourth zone, it could be very difficult. Fourth zone has a lot of players nearby, but this duo finds a perfect rotation here. They're able to rotate for relatively free. They spend only a couple of materials, and this is done by not going all at once. The two-part rotate. They instantly rotate as soon as fourth zone appears. They don't go the entire way. Base up, wait for a second, wait until the team that would be holding them starts shooting a team behind them, and then they're going to use that distraction just to walk on into zone, base up, and be perfectly secured within zone. A nice free rotate, and you need to do this as much as possible, is recognize the teams that could hold you when they're looking at something else and use that to your advantage to make a rotation. Now, the fifth zone rotate could have gone terribly wrong. It is a max distance fifth, and these two wind up getting beamed on the rotate. Clix has to go and box up immediately because he is now a prime target. After he heals up, they're going to be able to find a nice rotation in. They're going to use the buildings and the builds already placed down in front of them to avoid line of sight from any duos already in zone. This is what you need to do on most rotates, but it's hardest in fifth. So finding ways to put yourself in awkward positions to avoid line of sight, or even just using the terrain around you, the buildings, the old builds, is the perfect way to make these rotates. You need to be able to do this, otherwise you're going to be full building into fifth zone. When you get these max pulls without grapplers, there's nothing else that you can do other than use old builds or build yourself. Now let's talk about endgame and moving zones. Clix and Duke do something that I typically wouldn't advise players to do in first moving, and that is to play and claim ultimate low. Typically that's a little ahead of when you want to be down there, but in this situation, there's a couple of reasons why it's going to work. One, zone pulls straight back to them, so they already have the priority on the front side of moving. Secondly, it is going to give them the ability to farm extra materials, save some mats along the way, go through some old builds, and then continue to stay on front side without having to overextend. Lastly, we need to talk about the terrain and lack of elevation changes. This is good map awareness by these two, knowing that it's not going to go up a mountain, down a mountain. They're not going to have to deal with massive elevation changes. It may be a layer or two, but that is it. That is why it's going to work for them to play ultimate low ground here in first moving. Typically, you want to take it a little later, but nonetheless it worked. Now when we watch them here on first moving zone and we continue to see them, they're going to stick hip to hip, keeping front side low when the next zone appears. We see Clix is going to run immediately to the front side, Duke will follow. They do get cut off, but eventually get back to one another. And this kind of chemistry, this understanding of how one another play, comes with playing again and again over time. We see them develop as a duo over time here from qualifier 1 now to qualifier 3, where they've just advanced to finals. They are a much better duo, understanding the play style of one another. It helps them play perfectly, and they do a great job of pressuring fights and players here on the low ground from multiple angles. We see this repeatedly during this endgame where they're taking left, right side, front, back, whatever it may be, pressuring multiple angles, putting damage onto players from these angles, taking walls, and then just forcing someone onto the back foot. They sometimes will get refreshes and the elims, they sometimes won't, but the key is, even if they're not getting the refreshes, it is important that they walk away. They're not going all in on these refreshes, especially when they don't need them. They know they have builds to play off of, so they're going to damage players, get that advantage within a fight, knowing that player may come back to them on the low ground later. If a player's backside, getting pressured, has no mats, eventually low ground is going to clean them up, and that is exactly what is going to happen multiple times. They pressure people, Duke goes crazy, gets some elims, Clix goes crazy, gets some elims, and then we see them come together in the final moving zone. What's important, we see them play together here, shooting and editing with both players focusing on the same thing. We see them go ahead and find duos, pressure from multiple angles. The edits are coming together if they're on the same wall, shotguns out, ready for the shot, putting damage on, closing, and then finding ways to close this out. These guys are so consistent with their aim, and they consistently are looking for these elims, doing so together. That's the chemistry they've built over time of playing together. They do eventually lose the heal game. Clix makes a play, gets one knock, but Duke does go down. Nonetheless, still a great game. 8 elims in second place is awesome and really all you could ask for. If you enjoy educational Fortnite and you're enjoying the video, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more awesome content like this.